This is the Amos Madra Show.
Hello and a very warm welcome to today's show. My name is Amos Madra. Joining me today is Adam Master, who is the basketball apparel and teamwear brand from Manchester, UK. So, Adam, an absolute pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us about your brand. Tell us about, brand 161 Manchester. Where did it start? And how did the idea come about?
Well, appreciate you getting in touch, Amos. It's a pleasure to be here. What it is I guess that when I was a kid playing basketball in the early 90s, things were different then. There was no social media. There wasn't an internet, to be honest. So getting your information about the game was purely done through getting your friends who had Sky TV to record the game for you on VHS, and then you watch it 2 days out of time to when things were actually happening. Yeah. And of course, there was news agents that sold imported magazines like Slam magazine and ESPN and magazines like that. So you had to really dig out information. And I always felt that it's because I was a huge Manchester Giants fan. I followed them since I was a kid, and I always wanted to sort of wear stuff to represent Manchester and the Giants, but there just wasn't really any sort of market for British hoops. So it's something that's been a bee in my bonnet for about 25 years now. And then I just decided that this was the time. I mean, I was in the music industry for a long time, and music and hoops didn't always coincide. So I kind of, in a way, retired from the game for a couple of years there. And then when I came back into it, I just thought, you know what? Now's the time. Social media's there. The Giants had made a return to professional basketball. So I just thought, you know what? Let's do it. And then it sort of turned into what it's turned into, where Brand 161 isn't just about sort of making cool apparel to represent basketball, but the YouTube channel, the podcasts, it's become pretty full on. It's like a real labour of love. It's an unpaid full-time job.
Yeah, and of course you've made some great connections with the likes of Sean Wright Phillips, and of course the Manchester basketball teams are very much connected with you, whether it's the Mystics, Magic, Giants. They're all very much aware of who you are, what you do, and I see you as the Slam of Manchester, basically. It's that,
I like
that brand that's very much connected to basketball. Every basketball player is very much aware of it, wants to be on their site, on their social media platforms. And I think you very much represent that. So, I think something that's really interesting is you had that passion for basketball. I can imagine those days from the velodrome to the arena to wherever the Giants played, you followed them. You were there, got the apparel, everything. And, life catches up with you. The Manchester Giants starts to become the back of your mind. And at that time, the brand, Manchester Giant brand, to early 2000s, gone into administration. So basketball kind of disappeared. Social media's not taken off yet. And then obviously you just focused on being an adult and focusing on life itself. But, taking that risk and going back to that first passion of yours, that's really interesting.
Well, it is, like I say, a real labour of love, because there's an old saying, if you want to lose money, invest in British basketball. and I was fully aware of that. So it's difficult. But, the passion for the game, you mentioned the velodrome and the at the time, the 9X Arena. It kind of predates that. The first time I ever saw the game of basketball would have been in around 1987. Wow. When I was at Stretford Leisure Centre, because I used to have swimming lessons there. And whilst my sister was having her lesson, I just went for, like you do as a kid, you're in a leisure centre, you just go for a mooch around, check out the squash courts. And I noticed a sign on the wall on the viewing balcony that said home of Manchester United. And I thought, that's weird, because obviously, why would Man United be at Stretford Leisure Centre when 50 yards down the road is Old Trafford? So I went in, and what I saw was the Manchester United basketball team that had come about I think they were there for 2 seasons. I remember walking in and seeing these guys that were taller than any human I'd ever seen. They were doing these crazy skills. They were dunking the ball. And I was just like, this is the game I want to do. Didn't really know what I was watching, but I'll just never forget seeing that. I can even remember the odd face. I remember seeing Jeff Jones, who's the head coach of the Manchester Mystics now, who's
a legend, the legend that is.
Yeah, I remember Jeff Jones with his curly hair and a moustache. And then I remember a guy called Will Brown, who's an American player who's still a coach at the Manchester Magic. And I just remember being fascinated by it. And I remember thinking, wow, it looks weird seeing a Man United shirt, but without sleeves because they were wearing vests. And that was it. And then the next time it really kind of hit me for 6 was the Olympics in '92, watching the Dream Team. As kids, you all knew who Michael Jordan was. But again, unless you had Sky TV, you didn't really get to see what Michael Jordan was really all about. And then not only do you see Michael Jordan, you see Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing. And all of a sudden you go, wow, this is for real. So yeah, it's really interesting how things that happened so long ago still remain. So it's quite a nice thing when something from so long ago becomes so relevant to the now, if that makes sense.
When I think about you, I think about a quote that Gary Vaynerchuk made. I don't know if you know Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V.
No.
Great social media influencer, and he made this incredible business coach. He made this incredible quote, and he said, "There's some people who will find a passion, and they'll just stick to that passion. They'll be into that passion, whether it's collecting Star Wars memorabilia, whatever it is. They'll stick to that passion for years. No one's interested, and they're just there doing it, collecting it, and doing their own thing, and then suddenly it becomes the huge thing. But they've had that flag there from day one, and that's
crazy.
That's like, just I think of you when I think about that. You've been there from day one.
Say that because I am that person that becomes obsessive and collects things. I'm a collector. I'm a hoarder. Star Wars figures obviously was a thing when I was a kid too, but the funny thing, what I'd compare that to for myself is being from a music background as well. Vinyl has become huge, and I find it amusing because I never really moved away from vinyl. So there's this huge boom of people listening to music on vinyl, and I'm kind of like, well, I don't really stop listening to it, So it's like that obsession never really goes away. Much like with basketball, even when I was away doing what I was doing in the music industry, I still kind of kept to watch from afar. I'd buy the odd Jordan trading card off eBay, or just little bits of stuff like that. So you're absolutely right. It just doesn't go away.
Yeah.
Obsessions like sports, music, hobbies, just once it's in you, I don't think it goes away.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you see the current scene, basketball scene? Where do you see things going? Do you see it expanding? Are you optimistic about it?
Yeah, I mean, basketball, it's always been like the how can you put it? It's never quite broke through. It's always the bridesmaid, never the bride, is how I describe British basketball. Now, when you mentioned before the 90s, I don't know if you used to go to the games at the arena, but on any given night, you could walk into the arena and there'd be up to 14,000 people there watching the game, and it felt like being at an NBA game.
Yeah, especially against the Sheffield Sharks.
I was at the famous game where Sheffield won in the last second of the game to take the championship, and it felt like being an NBA game, the whole spectacle. And the thing that I find incredible is that is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But then when you look at the path that a few people from those days have taken,
Yeah.
head coach at the time, Nick Nurse,
Yeah.
is now an NBA champion with
Championship.
Toronto
Yeah.
Raptors. Phil Handy, who was one of the players, he's got multiple championship rings. He's now with the
a coach with
Lakers.
the Lakers, yeah.
Yeah, you know, this guy trained Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and you're thinking, wow, these are guys that cut their teeth in Manchester.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate to stay in touch with Phil Handy, and I did an interview with him a year or so ago after they'd won with Toronto. And there's a quote he said at the end of it, which I'll never forget. And he said, if it hadn't been for Manchester, there wouldn't be a Phil Handy that you see today, because it was such a huge pivotal point in his career, because he met Nick Nurse. You know, he got a taste for professional basketball. It is a new country. And I found that incredible. When it all came to an end, it was literally overnight. Like, those guys on the team will tell the story. They just won a championship. They're in the locker room celebrating at Wembley, I think it would have been. And the owners came in and said, we're pulling the plug, it's all over. You know, thank you for your service, off you go. And the Giants was gone. So it went from being just at that point where it's going to pop and they were going to start competing in Europe to just disappearing, which was tragic, because Manchester basketball's always been such a huge part of the basketball scene in the UK.
Absolutely, definitely. And people used to come from all over the Northwest, everywhere, just to, you know, come and watch the Giants. Any team that was playing in the BBL, you know, it would be a trip, because when you went to a Giants game, it was like going to an NBA game. And it's funny that you say that, because I remember the days of going to the arena and watching the Giants, and then going to my first NBA game, and I thought, this is no different to those days that I used to go watch the Giants. It's similar, it's the same. In fact, I could argue that the Giants, you know, was a little bit better than some of the games.
Well,
you know, it's incredible.
It's funny you say that, because back then, a lot of the guys that were playing in the BBL were inches away from the NBA. There was guys that were coming from the top colleges like Georgetown, you know, Texas Tech, North Carolina, all the big college basketball teams that you hear of. The players were coming from places like that, so they were sort of right on the cusp. A lot of them had played in NBA training camps. After the modern game, it's a couple more steps back. So with the game in Europe becoming what it is, the European game as a whole is now huge. And the skill set of the Europeans, I mean, you look at the Olympics, and you just see how good European basketball is now. That wasn't the case back then. So the worldwide appeal of basketball has got bigger and better, and other countries are now competing with the States and the NBA. So yeah, it's bizarre to think how much it's changed. But I don't know, it feels like with the BBL now, it's kind of bubbling up nicely again, because the Giants have moved into the amazing facility at Bellevue, the National Basketball Centre. Newcastle Eagles have their own facility. Leicester Riders have their own facility. These little facilities are coming up more and more. The standard of players is getting higher each season. So I don't think it's ever going to reach the dizzying heights of the 90s, but certainly it's becoming something again, where, you know, you're getting up to 3,000 people going to watch a game at a weekend, which is great, because it's where it needs to be.
Yeah, and it's that sustainability as well, isn't it? Because as long as it can maintain that, and like you said, they've got these amazing venues, Glasgow Rocks as well. That's another great one. So as long as it keeps expanding, it's great for the game, great for fans like you and I. Yeah, it's really good for the community, I suppose. Speaking of which, you're doing a lot with the Tropics, Manchester Tropics. I believe you're doing a video, and are we able to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm co-producing a documentary about the Moss Side Tropics, which a legendary team from Moss Side, obviously. They started in 1972, so next year will mark 50 years. It was a club started by an incredible coach from Manchester called Fitz Wallace, and he kind of started the club because of his love of basketball. But what it's become in its 50 years of being there is the hub of the Moss Side community, where they played at Powerhouse, just on the edge of Moss Side, was like a community centre with a youth club, the basketball teams. And it became, because as everybody knows, in the 90s, Moss Side was getting a lot of negative media attention because of the gangs, the drugs, the guns and whatnot. But at the heart of this community that was seemingly being victimised by the media was just that, a really beautiful community of people that had nothing to do with any of the trouble that was going on. And Powerhouse became a safe haven for a lot of young guys that, you know, didn't want to be on the streets. They wanted to get involved in sports. And Fitz will tell stories that any rubbish from outside basketball stayed at the door. When you went to Powerhouse to play ball, it was about basketball, it was about sports, it was about family and nothing else. And that team has spawned some of the best players that have ever come out of the city. You know, professional guys that have gone on to do huge things.
Stephen Gale,
Yorick Williams, Stefan Gill. You know, Adam Thompson, who still plays for the team, played on the Nick Nurse and Phil Handy team in the late 90s as a rookie. You know, so it's very much still there. And I've always been fascinated by them because when I was younger playing, the Tropics were a team that you feared playing because they just had no mercy. You know, they were going to destroy you. And I always found it fascinating that, you know, on any given night, you could go down and watch him and a guy that was a big time pro would have come home for the weekend and he'd suit up and play. So there was just this pull to the Moss Side Tropics, and I was fascinated by Moss Side as an area as well because whenever I'm around there, it's one of the most welcoming communities in the city. It's diverse, the food's amazing, you know, people always want to chat, and I was just like, how can we bring these together and make a film out of it? Because have you seen the film Hoop Dreams?
No, I haven't. So I'd love to know more.
It's a documentary that was filmed in the 80s about two high school kids, and it was filmed over 4 years following their journey from literally being playground players through to making it to college and all the trials and tribulations of life for their families. And it became an award-winning documentary. And ever since seeing that in the 90s, I had this obsession about making my own basketball movie. And the Tropics seemed to be the perfect subject matter. And after a complete chance conversation with a friend of mine that I play what we call old man's basketball on a Tuesday night, Phil Matthews, it turns out he's a documentary maker for sports and also had always wanted to do a hoops movie. So we talked about it. He liked the idea. He came down and watched the game. We get talking to a couple of the players, Kieran and Heron, always wanted to do a documentary about the Tropics. And it was just this perfect storm of all three groups of people wanting to do the same thing. So, yeah, ever since then, we've been following him for about 18 months. We're going to do this season as well. And it just seems it's kind of going a bit viral because we're releasing sort of little clips, little tasters, and people love it because, especially in Manchester, they recognise the guys and they're going, "Whoa, this looks amazing." I'll send you the trailer after we talk and you can see it. And because of the hype, we've been able to attract executive producers like Sean Wright Phillips. And some people go, "Well, that's crazy. He's an ex-Premier League footballer." But Sean, when he was in Manchester, grew up hanging out in Moss Side when he was at the City Academy. So he was really interested when he saw the trailer and has since become what he's become, the executive producer. It's incredible.
But I mean, sometimes just the way things fall into place nicely, you know, the time is just perfect and you couldn't have predicted any better yourself.
No.
But I think, you know, one thing that comes to mind when I think about you, Adam, is just that consistency, that passion for you know, Adam, when I think about the things that you've done, it's incredible because, again, it goes back to passion, commitment, and just to doing the thing that you absolutely love. And, you know, it comes across really well. And I think for anyone listening, anyone watching, I think for them to take away from this interview today is just that desire, that commitment, finding what you love and staying true to it, because it will become viral at some point and
Yeah.
things fall into place nicely as long as you put the work into it.
I mean, it's funny because you sort of get to a point in sports where when you reach a certain age, your body starts slowing down and you think, maybe it's time to stop trying to, jump around like you did 25 years ago. But the game of basketball is a gift that keeps giving. So the gift right now for me, as well as doing all this, is that I'm able to coach. I'm one of the assistant coaches for the Mystics under 14s now, and my daughter plays for them. So it's like falling in love with the game all over again, but from a completely different viewpoint. The Manchester Magic has been one of the best academies in the country since its inception all those years ago. And I get to do things like stream the games for the club. So it's the passion is there, but in a very different way now. Seeing grassroots basketball is actually my favorite thing. If I could choose a team to go and watch it, it would be like a Tropics game or a Magic game, because what you've got for example, in a Magic Academy game is you've got guys that are right at the start of their journey. They're still hungry for it. These are young guys that have still got their own hoop dreams. So it's as authentic as you're going to see. And that's both for the girls and the boys, because they've still got that dream that they're going to make a living out of playing basketball. And seeing it at its purest form, for me, is the biggest joy now, actually.
What a great ambassador for basketball you are indeed. How can people connect with you? How can people find out more about you?
Well, Bram161, social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the usual suspects. You more often than not see me hanging around at Wally Range at Manchester Basketball Centre, always doing something there, whether it's with the under-14s Mystics or streaming a Magic D2 game. I'd urge people to come down to Wally Range on a weekend and check out the Manchester Magic, because you're going to see some great basketball. Or I'll be over at, you can check out our stream of the Manchester Mystics on a Saturday over at Bellevue. Again, there's one thing I must touch on. The women's game, if you came over to Bellevue on a Saturday afternoon, you're going to get to see players that have Commonwealth silver medals. You're going to see Olympians from London 2012. You're going to see the very best players in the country. So yeah, there's so much basketball in Manchester to come and be a part of. So you're going to see me at one of them.
Adam, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a joy having you here, talking to you. Thank you for sharing your passion. And again, for anyone watching, listening, it's just that commitment. Stick to what it is that you love. Just keep going at it. And at some point, it will be the thing that's trending and things will fall into place nicely. Again, Adam, thank you so much. And
I appreciate
your time.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Cheers.
Amos Madra.